Imagine waking up on a hot summer morning nearly 2,000 years ago. There is no refrigerator, no freezer, and no electricity anywhere in sight. Yet somehow, the family's food is still fresh. A clay jar stands quietly in the corner of a small village house. Inside are vegetables, milk, and drinking water. The mystery is simple. How did they stop it from spoiling? For most of human history, people lived without modern cooling machines. But villages across the world developed clever ways to protect food from heat, insects, and time. Some of those methods may surprise you. Many of these techniques were created long before scientists understood bacteria. Even without modern knowledge, villagers carefully observed nature. Generation after generation, they learned what worked. Picture a dusty village road at sunset. Farmers return home carrying baskets of vegetables gathered only hours earlier. Every harvest mattered because losing food could mean hunger. This created a challenge that every village had to solve. How could food last for days, weeks, or even months? The answer led to some of the most fascinating traditions in human history. Mystery Introduction. Across deserts, mountains, forests, and river valleys, different communities found different solutions. Some buried food underground. Others hung it high in the air. A few used nothing more than clay, water, and wind. At first glance, these methods seem almost magical. How could a simple clay pot cool water on a scorching day? How could food remain edible without ice? The secret was not magic at all. It was careful observation of the natural world. Villagers became experts at reading the environment around them. Even today, travelers sometimes discover traditional villages where ancient cooling methods still survive. In parts of Africa, the Middle East, South Asia, and other regions, some families continue using clay-based cooling systems alongside modern appliances. Old knowledge has not completely disappeared. But before we uncover those methods, we need to understand something important. Food spoilage was one of the greatest daily challenges of village life. A single mistake could waste weeks of hard work. Imagine spending months growing crops. Then imagine watching them rot only days after harvest. For villagers, preventing that loss was not a convenience. It was survival. Background story. Thousands of years ago, village communities depended heavily on seasonal harvests. Food was not available in supermarkets every day. People had to store what nature provided. During good seasons, families often produced more food than they could immediately eat. The challenge became preserving that extra supply. Without preservation, abundance could quickly become waste. In many regions, homes were built with thick walls made from earth, stone, or clay. These materials naturally stayed cooler than the outside air. The house itself became part of the food storage system. Deep inside such homes, dark storage rooms protected grain, fruits, and vegetables. Sunlight was kept away whenever possible. Heat was considered an enemy. Village elders carefully passed down storage knowledge to younger generations. A child might learn where to place a clay jar. A teenager might learn which foods could be stored together and which could not. These lessons were rarely written in books. They lived in daily practice. Knowledge survived because families used it every single day. Ancient method introduction. Among the oldest and most fascinating techniques was the use of earth itself. The ground beneath a village could act like a natural refrigerator. And this discovery changed everything. Many villagers noticed that soil a short distance below the surface remained cooler than the air above. Even during hot weather, underground spaces often stayed surprisingly stable. This simple observation became the foundation of several storage methods. Some communities dug storage pits. Others created underground chambers. Certain regions even developed entire food cellars beneath homes. But how exactly did these underground spaces keep food fresh? And why were they often more effective than leaving food inside the house? That is where our story becomes even more interesting. Ancient method explanation. Picture a farmer lifting a wooden cover from a shallow underground pit. Cool air rises from below. Inside are baskets filled with root vegetables gathered weeks earlier. The deeper soil remained far less affected by daily temperature changes. While the sun heated the surface, underground spaces stayed relatively cool. This helped slow the spoilage process. Many villages stored foods such as onions, garlic, turnips, carrots, and potatoes underground. These crops naturally lasted longer when protected from heat and sunlight. The earth became a silent guardian. In colder regions, some communities created storage cellars lined with stone or wood. These spaces helped maintain stable conditions throughout much of the year. Families often checked them carefully throughout the seasons. But underground storage was only one solution. Another remarkable method stood right in the middle of the village home. It looked simple, yet it used the power of physics. The magic of clay and water. Imagine two clay pots. One sits inside the other. The space between them is filled with damp sand. At first glance, it seems ordinary. No machinery. No electricity. No ice. But as water slowly evaporates from the outer surface, heat is carried away. The inner chamber becomes cooler than the surrounding air. Nature does the work. Fresh vegetables placed inside can often stay usable longer than they would in direct heat. Cool drinking water becomes available even during hot afternoons. All from clay, sand, and water. Traditional evaporative cooling systems have appeared in different forms across several regions of the world. The exact designs vary from place to place. But the basic idea remains remarkably similar. For villagers, this was not a scientific experiment. It was practical knowledge earned through observation. They simply knew that certain pots kept food cooler. Step-by-step traditional storage process. The process often began before food was even harvested. Farmers selected crops at the proper stage of maturity. Overripe produce spoiled more quickly. After harvesting, damaged items were separated from healthy ones. A single spoiled vegetable could affect nearby food. Careful sorting was essential. Next came cleaning and preparation. Some foods were brushed clean. Others were dried in shaded areas before storage. Excess moisture was often avoided. The prepared food was then placed in pits, baskets, clay jars, or storage rooms. Each food required its own approach. Experience guided every decision. Ventilation also mattered. Many storage spaces allowed gentle airflow. Stale, trapped air could create problems. Families regularly inspected stored food. Anything showing signs of decay was removed. Preservation required constant attention. This was not a one-time task. It was part of everyday village life. Storage and survival were closely connected. Why it works. To understand why these methods worked, imagine leaving fruit under direct sunlight. The heat speeds up change. Freshness disappears more quickly. Now imagine placing that same fruit in a cooler, darker location. The process slows down. Time seems to move differently. Most traditional preservation methods shared a common goal. Reduce heat. Control moisture. Protect food from pests. Whether using underground chambers, clay pots, shaded rooms, or drying racks, villagers were managing the environment around their food. They were working with nature instead of fighting it. What makes this especially fascinating is that many of these ideas remain relevant today. Modern refrigeration uses advanced technology. But the basic objective is surprisingly familiar. Keep food in conditions that slow spoilage. Historical importance. Without effective food storage, many ancient villages could not have grown into stable communities. A successful harvest needed to last beyond a single week. It needed to support families through changing seasons. Stored food provided security during storms, droughts, and harsh winters. It offered protection when fresh crops were unavailable. Communities depended on it. In some regions, food reserves even helped villages survive difficult years. These stores became symbols of preparation and wisdom. They represented hope for the future. Village knowledge was often tested during times of hardship. The communities that mastered preservation techniques usually had a better chance of enduring challenges. Experience became a valuable resource. But villagers did not stop with cooling methods. They developed other clever strategies that could preserve food for months at a time. Some of those techniques are still used in homes today. More traditional preservation methods. Now imagine a quiet village morning. Rows of sliced fruits hang beneath a shaded roof. A gentle breeze moves through them as they slowly dry. Long before refrigerators existed, many communities discovered that removing moisture could help food last much longer. Dry food often spoiled more slowly than fresh food. This simple idea changed village life. Fish, fruits, herbs, and certain vegetables were commonly dried in suitable climates. Families carefully watched the weather. Too much moisture could ruin the process. In some regions, drying racks stood beside homes. In others, food was spread across woven mats. Every village adapted the technique to local conditions. When properly dried and stored, food became easier to keep for extended periods. It also became easier to transport during travel. This was especially valuable in remote areas. The role of smoke. Picture a wooden structure standing near a forest village. A small fire burns below. Thin streams of smoke rise slowly into the air. Certain communities learned that smoke could help preserve some foods. The process required patience. Sometimes it continued for many hours or even days. The goal was not simply cooking. It was creating conditions that helped food remain usable longer. Different regions developed their own traditions and techniques. The smell of smoke often became part of village identity. Travelers could sometimes recognize local foods by their distinctive aroma. Preservation and culture became connected. Salt, a valuable village resource. In many parts of the world, salt was considered extremely important. It flavored food. But it also played a role in preservation. Villagers sometimes used salt to help extend the usability of certain foods. The exact methods varied widely from one culture to another. Local traditions shaped the process. Because salt could be difficult to obtain in some regions, it often held significant value. Trade routes carried it across mountains, deserts, and coastlines. Entire communities depended on access to it. A simple handful of salt could represent far more than seasoning. For many families, it was part of their food security system. Its importance should not be underestimated. Interesting facts. One fascinating detail about traditional villages is that food storage knowledge was often highly local. A technique that worked perfectly in one climate might fail in another. Nature set the rules. Desert communities faced different challenges than mountain communities. Tropical villages faced different challenges than northern villages. Each environment inspired unique solutions. This diversity created an incredible variety of preservation traditions around the world. No single method solved every problem. Adaptation was the true secret. Another surprising fact is that some traditional storage structures lasted for generations. Parents used them. Their children used them. And sometimes their grandchildren used them too. These structures became part of the village landscape. People grew up seeing them every day. They were as familiar as wells, gardens, and pathways. Modern-day examples. Although refrigerators are now common in many places, traditional techniques have not completely disappeared. In some rural communities, older methods continue to be used alongside modern technology. Practical knowledge survives. Certain families still store crops in underground spaces. Others continue using clay-based cooling containers for water and produce. These traditions remain useful where conditions allow. In some regions, drying foods remains a normal part of seasonal life. Harvest time often brings scenes that look surprisingly similar to those from centuries ago. Old habits endure. Interest in traditional preservation is also growing among people who study sustainability and self-sufficient living. Many are curious about how earlier generations managed resources so efficiently. Ancient ideas are finding new audiences. Yet one question remains unanswered. Of all these preservation methods, which lesson from the past may be the most valuable for modern people? The answer is not a pit, a cellar, or even a clay pot. It is something much deeper. Final reveal. Imagine standing in the center of an ancient village at sunset. Smoke rises gently from cooking fires. Children run between homes while elders prepare food for the evening meal. At first, it seems the story is about storage pits, clay jars, drying racks, and cellars. Those tools were certainly important. But they were only part of the picture. The greatest preservation method was actually knowledge. Knowledge passed from one generation to the next. Knowledge that could not be stored in a jar. Villagers observed the seasons. They watched the weather. They learned how heat, shade, wind, and moisture affected the food around them. Over many years, these observations became traditions. Traditions became habits. And habits became the foundation of village survival. A clay pot by itself was not the secret. The secret was knowing when and how to use it. The same was true for every preservation technique. That wisdom allowed communities to survive droughts, harsh winters, poor harvests, and long journeys. Without it, many villages would have struggled to endure. Knowledge was their invisible refrigerator. What modern people can learn. Today, most of us can open a refrigerator door without a second thought. Cold air appears instantly. Food stays fresh with very little effort. Yet the story of traditional villages reminds us of something important. Technology is powerful. But understanding nature is powerful too. Ancient villagers paid close attention to the world around them. They noticed small details that many people overlook today. Those details often made the difference between waste and survival. Their methods reflected patience rather than speed, observation rather than automation, experience rather than convenience. Even in the modern world, these lessons remain valuable. Reducing food waste, storing harvests wisely, and respecting resources are challenges that still matter. The context has changed, but the principles remain relevant. A journey across time. Think about how remarkable this achievement really was. For thousands of years, people preserved food without electric power. Entire civilizations depended on these skills. Across deserts, mountains, river valleys, forests, and coastal settlements, countless communities developed their own answers. Different methods. Different materials. One shared goal. Keep food safe. Protect the harvest. Provide for the family. Secure the future. Many of the structures have disappeared. Many of the original tools are gone. Yet the ideas behind them continue to inspire people around the world. Whenever someone stores crops in a root cellar, dries herbs in the sun, or cools water in a clay vessel, a small piece of that ancient knowledge lives on. The past quietly survives in the present. Conclusion. The next time you open a refrigerator, take a moment to imagine life before electricity. Imagine the creativity required to keep food fresh. Imagine the generations of experience hidden behind simple village traditions. From underground storage pits to clay cooling pots, from drying racks to carefully designed food rooms, villagers created remarkable solutions using the materials around them. Their ingenuity shaped everyday life. These methods were not merely survival techniques. They were expressions of human adaptation, observation, and resilience. They tell a story about how people learn to work with nature. And perhaps that is the most fascinating lesson of all. Long before modern machines, ordinary villagers found extraordinary answers to one of humanity's oldest challenges. Thank you for joining us on this journey through history with Pure Village Life Baba. If you enjoyed discovering these forgotten traditions, be sure to subscribe, leave a comment, and tell us where you are watching from. Until next time, keep exploring the wisdom of the past.